Thank you so much, Nancy. And thank you everyone for joining us today. Like Nancy said, I'm SJ Glynn. Really appreciate you being here, and I'm excited to talk to you about some of our new research. So, there are a lot of things that I love about California, and one of them are the huge advances that women have made in the state over the years. Women are the majority of the state's population, the majority of adults with college degrees, and the majority of current college students. But in spite of all these advances, gender equality remains elusive. For example, women don't have access to the same jobs or the same incomes. We know that women in the state are 82% of all nurses, but only 3% of all electricians. And more than half of women renters live in unaffordable housing, which includes 77% of single mothers. So, why do these imbalances persist? It's not just about what happens when people are at school or when they're at work. Another core driver of inequality has to do with what happens when women and men are at home. And we explore this in our most recent report, When Time Isn't on Your Side, Unpaid Work and the Free Time Gender Gap in California. In it, we analyze differences in how women and men spend their time, especially time spent taking care of children and time spent on household work. And this isn't some abstract theoretical topic, which is part of why I care about it so much. It's something that impacts all of our lives directly. So I grew up in Yuba County, which is just a little bit north of where most of you are right now. And that's me in my mom's arms. We were at my dad's graduation from UC Davis. And in our house, when I was growing up, there was a very significant gender divide when it came to the division of labor. My mom, who I do want to say was helped by all of us kids, but she did most of the routine household chores. She did most of the childcare, and she made dinner every night, for example. Meanwhile, my dad, on the other hand, was mostly responsible for things that were much less frequent, like yard work and car maintenance. And nothing about my experience growing up was unique or unusual. That same pattern, where mom does most of the housework and childcare, is still largely what things look like in most families in California today. So, in our report, we used data from the US Bureau of Labor Statistics American Time Use Survey, and we compared the amount of time that men and women in California spend on common daily activities. So, this is stuff like taking care of children, cooking and cleaning, doing other household chores and labor, the time people spent at their jobs, their free time, and even things like how many hours people slept. But no matter how we cut the data, we found that women consistently spend more time on housework and childcare than men. And when we look specifically at parents, mothers spend nearly twice as much time as fathers taking care of their homes and their children. And this is the point whenever I'm talking about time data, when people always ask me, wait a minute, SJ, but don't men work longer hours? Isn't this really fair in the end? Aren't families working out a negotiation so that in the end, everybody's doing the same amount? And certainly in some individual cases, that can be true. But as an overall pattern across the nation and within California, that's not the case. So we find that, most women have jobs, including most women in California. Most mothers are employed outside the home. And while it is true that on average men do spend a little bit more time at work, once you add up all of the labor in the day, time spent at a job, time spent doing work around the home, time spent taking care of children, women work more total hours than men. And as a result, there's a free time gender gap, and women have significantly less free time to themselves than men. So when women spend more time taking care of their families and their homes, it means naturally that they have less time for everything else, right? And that includes time for paid work, but also time to invest in their health, in their futures, and in their communities. And this really matters because women have fewer opportunities due to this inequality in the home. But the big question we keep coming back to is, why does this imbalance continue? And one of the reasons is because public policies, even policies that on their face can seem unrelated, often have gendered outcomes. And I've seen this in my own life because, like I told you, I grew up in a family where my mom did most of the childcare and most of the household labor, but that was primarily shaped by outside forces, not my parents' preferences. My mom made dinner every night because my dad didn't get home from work until after 7 p.m. Like I said, we lived in Yuba County, but he worked in South Sac. And he wanted to be home with us more, but we were a big family and it was cheaper for us to live in a rural area. So he ended up with a long commute. Now, both of my parents had jobs, but my dad was our family's primary earner. Why him and not my mom? Well, the GI Bill helped pay for my dad's education. And at that time, my mom only had a high school diploma. largely because she had enrolled in college, but that was before Title IX, and they wouldn't let her take the engineering classes she wanted, so she left. And my mom ended up working as an aide at our school so that she could have a schedule that aligned with us kids. Our family definitely needed the money, but for her to find a better job would have meant that she'd had a different work schedule. So any salary increase that she could have experienced would have been dwarfed by childcare expenses. And that's how it often happens, even today. So I want to be very, very clear about this. The problem is not in doing household labor or childcare. These are valuable and very important pursuits. Caregiving is the foundation of our economy, and it's incredibly important. But it also represents a classic market failure, and our society does not value care anywhere near its true level of importance. And this ends up being a major contributor to gender inequality. The disproportionate caregiving responsibilities that women experience are both a cause and an effect of why the way that they live in the world looks different. The US is one of only a handful of countries in the entire world where women aren't guaranteed paid maternity leave, and the US invests far less in childcare than other comparable economies. Now, California was the first state to offer paid parental leave, and 13 other states have followed suit by passing their own paid leave laws. But the amount of time that's allowed for parental leave in California is still much shorter than what's available in other countries. And it's even shorter than what's available in all but one of the other paid leave states. On top of that, childcare prices in California are among the highest in the nation. And that's in spite of the fact that childcare workers are paid some of the lowest wages in the entire economy. And women don't have to be mothers or to have young children at home to feel these impacts. Women do the majority of all family caregiving, and that includes care for elders and for people with disabilities. And I know myself, there are real joys and real meaning in caregiving, but women still end up paying a price for it in terms of foregone pay, diminished future earnings, and weakened retirement security. But it's not just about economics. Women also have less time, and the time they do have is arranged differently because it so often involves taking care of other people. And this impacts a really broad range of policy areas, even when immediately on its face it doesn't seem related. So, take housing, for example. Housing costs in California are high, and people often end up with one of two options. You can live in a place where there are more good jobs, but probably spend a bigger share of your income on housing and childcare. Or, like my family, you can live where it's cheaper, but that might mean that you end up with fewer job opportunities, lower wages, longer commutes, and less accessible childcare. So it's easy to see how this can create a vicious cycle, especially for women. Or think about transportation. California is a geographically large state and it has a significant car culture. Public transportation is an important tool to help reduce congestion and to reduce emissions, and men and women use it differently. Women are more likely to be traveling outside typical commute times because they're more likely to work in sectors like healthcare where there are non-standard hours. And they're more likely to take multi-stop trips doing things like running errands, often with their kids in tow. But it's still very common for schedules and services to be slanted towards the needs of a 9 to 5 weekday commuter. So, in other words, towards the needs of more men. Or climate policy. Climate disasters don't just ravage our landscapes, they also expose and deepen inequalities. Care work is essential in responding to the needs of people when there are climate disasters like heat waves, fires, and floods. And care is critical to community resilience. Care work is climate work. Think about the Los Angeles fires we had earlier this year. Nearly every school in LA County was closed. And who do you think was most likely to either miss work or have to scramble to find childcare for the 1.3 million students who suddenly had nowhere to go? Our research shows that on a typical day, it's women who are doing the majority of caregiving. And in times of crisis, we know that those imbalances only get more extreme. So, when we center the needs of the folks who are the most vulnerable, we ensure that everyone benefits. But without a gender lens, even very well-intended policies can have negative unintended consequences, like increasing women's unpaid labor or excluding them from opportunities. Integrating a gender perspective can help ensure that this doesn't happen by baking equality considerations in throughout the entire process, from development through implementation.